wokeism has taken a turn in America, in the UK, in Germany, in France, in Scandinavia, and we see right-wing people, the alt-right and the far-right, getting more and more spaces and platform and being louder and louder every day. You would think that these people are only growing, but I'm here to say that their politics might actually be dying. So let's talk about Sweden. What is mainstream Swedish culture and politics? The country is known for being very socialist, social democratic, very secular, and even feminist, individualistic, and a wholesome country in many ways. Sweden has been like this for decades. Older people are usually associated with being more conservative, especially in America, and even being Christian. But in Sweden, it is very common for them to be very secular and left leaning. So I'm talking about boomers and even people who are older than that, and Gen X as well. But in recent years, this has taken a turn in America, in the UK, that I'm sure you know of, but of course also in Sweden. After the election in Sweden in 2014, the popularity of the far right party, the Swedish Democrats, started to skyrocket. It skyrocketed as youth felt that the woke culture and the left leaning Swedish establishment was getting old. The more international cringe culture and anti SJW notions were also playing a role in drifting Swedish youth further apart from the status quo, good old wholesome Swedish values. Anti SJW sentiment was huge in America between 2016 to 2018, but has a different context in America than Sweden. Swedes were reacting to a specific type of left wing establishment built upon mainstream Swedish values from 100 years ago, deeply ingrained in Swedish culture and politics. America, on the other hand, is not left leaning in its core nature, so Americans were reacting to a woke culture specific to the American context. Since social democracy is such a core part of modern Swedish culture and politics, the Swedish establishment has had more time to wear out any sincerity and any good parts of the traditional Swedish values. And the Swedish people has had more time to sort of become sick and tired of its flaws and the insincere nature of the establishment. That's why Swedish people came on so strongly on the right wing wave of that time period, post 2014. You could say Sweden has kind of been ahead of the game before other Western countries, especially compared to America. This form of right wing politics in Sweden has become mainstream now in recent years, as early as 2020 or 2022. There was an election in Sweden in 2022 where you could tell for sure that this type of alternative right wing politics was actually mainstream and accepted by the people to a large extent in Sweden. I would argue that this is kind of indicating that the pendulum is about to swing again. After the genocide in Palestine started, there has been massive protests in Sweden, just like many other countries, signifying that the left is still well and alive. Palestine protests are grassroots, indicating that the pendulum is about to swing. Among a lot of youth in Sweden, there's a kind of social standard that you should express sympathy and have a understanding of the right-wing perspective, especially this specific type of alternative right wing that has emerged in recent years. If you don't, you risk being perceived as a cringe establishment sympathizer. I would argue that right wing politics is not going to grow anymore and is actually kind of out and not as trending, but it's not going to stay in the mainstream as much as it was around the 2020 era. I don't think a left wing revival is necessarily what we will see anytime soon either. I think as Swedish and Western civilization overall is declining, people both on the left and the right will become more and more alternative and fringe and turn more against the establishment rather than the mainstream, either moving towards one of the sides, moving towards right or left wing. So, should you have an understanding for the right wing alternative that has emerged in Sweden in recent years and that a lot of millennial and Gen Z people sympathize with, yes, but should just stay in that echo chamber and not consider other perspectives? No, and I don't think that the people overall in Sweden will turn very alternative right anymore. I don't think that the alternative right will keep growing in Sweden. I think it has reached its cap.